Before the age of 33, he controlled half the known world, not a province, not a kingdom, half the world. He crushed the Persian Empire. He marched through deserts that killed thousands. He stood at the edge of India and still wanted more. They called him great, but greatness is not the same as goodness. So what was he, a visionary, or a man who mistook ambition for destiny? Alexander did not simply expand borders. He expanded the idea of what one human being could attempt. And when someone refuses to accept limits, history bends. But eventually, so does the man. At just 20 years old, most men are still searching for direction. Alexander was planning to conquer the known world. By 30, he would control territories stretching from Greece to Egypt, through Persia, and into the edges of India. No Greek before him had imagined such scale. No Macedonian before him had possessed such audacity. And yet the question remains, was Alexander truly great, or was he simply unstoppable? He did not inherit a peaceful throne. He inherited ambition. His father, Philip II of Macedon, had built a powerful army and unified much of Greece. But Philip's dream was incomplete. Persia, the vast empire to the east, still dominated the imagination of the ancient world. When Philip was assassinated in 336 BCE, Alexander was only 20, young, unproven. Surrounded by rivals who believed his rule would collapse within months, it did not. Instead of hesitation, he moved with precision. Potential challengers were eliminated. Greek rebellions were crushed. The city of Thebes, once proud and defiant, was destroyed as a warning to others. The message was unmistakable. The boy king was no boy. But conquest was not only political for Alexander, it was personal. Educated by Aristotle, raised on Homer's Iliad, he saw himself as a successor to Achilles, a figure destined not merely to rule, but to achieve immortal glory. This matters because Alexander did not simply seek land, he sought legacy. And when he crossed into Asia to confront the Persian Empire, he was not just launching a military campaign. He was testing the limits of human ambition. He had studied philosophy. He had admired heroes. He had watched his father turn Macedon into a war machine. But now, the responsibility was his. Before he could face Persia, he had to secure power at home. Northern tribes tested him. Greek cities whispered rebellion. Many expected Macedon to collapse without Philip. Alexander did not hesitate. He moved fast. He marched north, crushed the uprisings, returned south before resistance could unite. When Thebes revolted, he answered with overwhelming force. The city was destroyed, its walls torn down, its people enslaved. Brutal, deliberate, effective. Greece fell silent. After Thebes, no one questioned the young king. Victory at 20 does something dangerous. It creates momentum. Alexander was no longer defending a throne. He was preparing to expand it. To the east stood the Persian Empire, vast, wealthy, legendary, the rival that haunted Greek memory for generations. Challenging it was bold. Overthrowing it seemed impossible. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed into Asia Minor. He did not bring the largest army in the world. He brought discipline, speed, absolute confidence. Tradition says he paused near Troy to honor Achilles. Whether symbolic or sincere, The gesture revealed his mindset. He was stepping into history on purpose. The first major clash came at the Granicus River. Persian forces waded across the water, secure in their position. Crossing under attack was one of the most dangerous maneuvers in ancient warfare. Alexander ordered the charge. He led from the front. His helmet was struck. He nearly died in the chaos of close combat before a companion intervened. His courage was real, so was his appetite for risk. When the Persians finally broke and fled, the message was clear. This was not a raid, it was the beginning of a revolution. Victory at Granicus changed everything. Until that moment, Alexander was a bold invader. After it, he became a serious threat. City after city in Asia Minor opened its gates. Some surrendered peacefully, others resisted and paid the price. Alexander understood something fundamental. Reputation travels faster than armies. Fear could conquer before swords ever touched. But the real test was still ahead. Darius III, king of Persia, could not ignore him forever. In 333 BCE, the two finally met at Issus. The Persian army was larger, better supplied, more experienced. On paper, Alexander should have lost. But war is not decided on paper. It is decided in moments. Instead of fighting cautiously, Alexander aimed directly for Darius. He knew the psychology of power. Armies collapse when leaders flee, and so he struck at the center. The battle was brutal, confused, close. Macedonian discipline clashed with Persian scale. For a moment, the outcome hung in balance. Then Darius broke. The king of Persia, ruler of a vast empire, turned and fled the field. And when he fled, something invisible shattered. The illusion of Persian invincibility. Alexander did not just win a battle at Issus, he broke a myth. Darius left behind more than soldiers. He left behind his royal family, captured alive. Alexander treated them with unexpected respect. No humiliation, no public cruelty. This was not softness, it was strategy. Mercy, when controlled, becomes a weapon of legitimacy. Now the path opened south toward Egypt. But something inside Alexander was shifting. With each victory, his confidence grew. With each triumph, his identity expanded. He was no longer just a king from Macedon. He was beginning to see himself as something larger, destined, chosen, perhaps even divine. Egypt did not resist him. It welcomed him. After years under Persian rule, Alexander entered not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. Temples opened their gates. Priests honored him. There was no uprising, no siege, only recognition. And here, something significant happened. Alexandria founded a city. Alexandria, not merely a military base, but a vision, a center of trade, of culture, of knowledge, a place where Greek thought would merge with Egyptian tradition, where ideas would travel farther than armies ever could. This was not just expansion, this was transformation. Then came the journey into the desert, to the Oracle of Siwa. There, according to tradition, he was addressed as the son of Zeus Ammon. Whether political theater or genuine belief, the effect was undeniable. From this moment, Alexander's identity began to change. He was no longer just king. He was something elevated. An elevation alters perception. His soldiers had followed a brilliant commander. Now they followed a man who allowed himself to be called divine. Confidence became myth. Myth became aura. Aura became power, but power without restraint grows unstable. From Egypt, Alexander turned back toward the heart of Persia. The decisive confrontation awaited. Gaugamela, an open plain prepared for one purpose: to crush him. Darius assembled a vast army, cavalry stretching across the horizon, chariots ready to break Macedonian lines. Everything favored Persia, except one thing: Alexander's refusal to think within limits. He adjusted his formation, anticipated the chariots, waited for the precise moment. Then he struck, not cautiously, not defensively, but directly at the king. History does not always turn on numbers. Sometimes it turns on nerve. At Gaugamela, nerve defeated scale. Darius fled, and with that flight, the Persian Empire collapsed. Babylon opened its gates. Susa surrendered. Persepolis fell. 2 centuries of dominance ended in a single campaign. Victory changes a man, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. After Gaugamela, Alexander was no longer a challenger. He was master of the largest empire the world had seen. Babylon welcomed him with ceremony. Treasures flowed, titles multiplied. The young king from Macedon now ruled lands that stretched beyond imagination, and something subtle began to shift. Alexander did not return west to consolidate power. He moved deeper east, through the heart of Persia, across mountains, into territories that had never heard the Greek language. This was no longer revenge for past invasions. This was expansion without visible limit. In Persepolis, parts of the royal palace were burned. Some say it was symbolic, revenge for Persian destruction of Athens generations earlier. Others say it was drunken impulse. Either way, flames rose against the night sky. Power had turned theatrical. Alexander began adopting Persian court customs. He wore royal garments. He demanded proskynesis, the act of bowing before him, a gesture his Macedonian companions found humiliating. To Persians, it was tradition. To Macedonians, it was submission. He married Roxana, a noblewoman from Bactria. Later, he encouraged his officers to marry Persian women. He envisioned a blended empire, a fusion of cultures. This was visionary. It was also unsettling, because Alexander was no longer simply conquering Persia. He was becoming part of it. His closest companions began to feel distance. Familiar rituals disappeared. Old loyalties felt strained. And when power isolates, suspicion follows. Conspiracies were uncovered, or believed to be uncovered. Old friends were executed. Clitus, a general who once saved Alexander's life, was killed by Alexander himself during a drunken argument. In that moment, something broke. The hero of Granicus and Issus was still there, but now so was the ruler who feared dissent. Ambition was no longer a choice. It was momentum. India was not Persia. It did not collapse at the sight of him. In 326 BCE, Alexander crossed the Hydaspes River. On the opposite bank stood King Porus, disciplined, prepared, and backed by something the Macedonians had rarely faced before: war elephants. Massive, armored, terrifying. For the first time in years, Alexander faced an enemy who did not retreat. The battle was brutal. Rain turned the ground to mud. Elephants crushed men and shattered formations. Horses panicked. Lines broke. The air filled with chaos. Victory did not come easily. But Alexander adapted. He maneuvered around the elephants, isolated enemy units, and struck with precision. Porus fought with courage even after being wounded. When Porus was captured, Alexander asked him how he wished to be treated. "Like a king," Porus replied. And Alexander respected him, not out of mercy alone, but because he recognized strength. Yet something had changed. This was no longer a campaign of unstoppable momentum. This was exhaustion. His soldiers had marched for nearly a decade, across deserts, through mountains, over endless battlefields. They had followed him from Greece to the edge of the world, and now when Alexander proposed pushing even further east, they refused. For the first time, he faced resistance not from enemies, but from his own army. The men who had conquered continents said no, and for the first time in his career, Alexander had to listen. He turned back, not because he was defeated, but because even ambition has limits when bodies collapse. The march home would not be triumphant. It would be costly, and the cracks that began in India would widen long before he reached Babylon. The return was not triumphant. It was brutal. Instead of choosing safer routes, Alexander led his army through the Gedrosian Desert, one of the harshest landscapes imaginable. Heat, drought, starvation. Thousands died without a single battle. Why choose that path? Strategy or pride? Some believed he wanted to prove that nothing could defeat him. Not kings, not empires, not even nature. Men collapsed. Supplies vanished. Discipline weakened. What war had spared, the environment consumed. When he reached Babylon in 323 BCE, he had conquered more territory than any Greek before him. Persia was broken. Egypt secured. India reached. He was 32 and still planning more. New campaigns were discussed, Arabia perhaps beyond. Expansion had become instinct. Movement had become identity. Then illness. A fever. Days passed. He grew weaker. The strongest commander of his era could no longer stand. Rumors spread immediately. Poison, infection, exhaustion. The cause remains uncertain. The result does not. Alexander died in Babylon, 32 years old. No clear successor. No stable structure. An empire held together by personality rather than institutions. When asked who should inherit his realm, tradition says he answered, "To the strongest." Whether legend or fact, the outcome was chaos. His generals divided the empire. Alliances formed and collapsed. War followed. Politically, his empire fractured. But culturally, something endured. Greek language spread across vast territories. Trade intensified. Ideas merged. The Hellenistic world emerged, a fusion of East and West that reshaped philosophy, science, and art. His empire did not survive intact. His influence did. And that is the paradox of Alexander. He conquered the world, but he could not outlive it. So was he truly great? The word is used easily, but greatness in history does not mean kindness. It does not mean justice. It does not mean peace. It means impact. Alexander redrew maps. He shattered an empire. He forced civilizations into contact that might otherwise have remained distant for centuries. He accelerated history, but he also left destruction behind him. Cities burned, armies crushed, families displaced. His victories were not abstract, they were real. That is the uncomfortable truth. He was visionary and violent, strategic and impulsive, educated by Aristotle, yet guided by Homeric glory. He believed he was destined, and perhaps that belief made him unstoppable, but it also made him incapable of stopping. That may be the deeper lesson. Ambition without limit does not end calmly. It ends abruptly. Alexander did not fall in battle. He did not lose his final war. He was defeated by mortality, the one boundary no conqueror escapes. He chased immortality through conquest. History gave him memory instead, and maybe that is what he wanted all along, to be remembered, to be spoken of, to be debated. Centuries later, we still use his name with a title attached to it, Alexander the Great, not because he was perfect, not because he was moral, but because he altered the direction of his age so dramatically that history could not move forward unchanged. He expanded ambition. He expanded the idea of what a single individual might attempt, and in doing so, he left behind a question that still echoes: how far can power go before it begins to consume the one who wields it? That is the story of Alexander. Not just conquest, but consequence. History remembers conquerors, but time remembers consequences. Alexander mastered the art of expansion. He did not master the art of permanence, and perhaps that is the difference between power and wisdom.